Superheroes are American gods. They're the American mythology. Just like the Greeks had theirs, the Romans had theirs. These are the all-American heroes.
Superheroes are really just a personification of who we believe ourselves to be. Pioneers and heroes.
A lot of folks who came to this country had that feeling of, I can become the hero to my family, I can be better, I can be bigger. Wow, I know, right?
Video games, television, animation, cinema, none of this stuff would happen without the comic books.
It's American. It's sort of like jazz. It's an American art form.
Join the conversation online and go to pbs.org for more interviews, extras, and outtakes. Superheroes has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, exploring the human endeavor. This program is also supported by the Seedlings Foundation, Ira and Paula Resnick, in honor of their two superheroes, Jack and Samantha, David E. Shaw and Beth Kobliner Shaw, the National Endowment for the Arts, Buddy Teisch, and by contributions to your local PBS stations from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Liev Schreiber. Like millions of kids, I was mesmerized by the fantastic adventures of Caped Crusaders, Men of Steel, and their evil adversaries. Eventually, I got to act out every kid's dream by playing one of those characters on screen. Superheroes were first created by young men dreaming of an escape from the Great Depression. Using only pen and ink, along with their extraordinary imaginations, these artists and writers created a brand new industry nearly overnight. Their heroes burst forth out of disposable comic books, which could be had for one thin dime on newsstands and drugstores in every town in America. Since then, they have exploded onto the radio, TV and movies, the internet, and video games. Superheroes have conquered the world. Along the way, our costumed adventurers have come to the rescue of our nation in times of trouble. They have uplifted us. They've shown us how to be better versions of ourselves. Ever since 1938, when the first great comic book character leapt onto the national scene, superheroes have been fighting a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
The first appearance of Superman in Action Comics #1 is quite possibly the most important comic book in all of comic history. We recently sold a copy for $2,161,000. This is it, the Holy Grail of Holy Grails. It's from June 1938. It is such an incredibly important part of American pop culture. It's hard to believe that in the midst of the Great Depression, a copy could be bought for 10 cents.
Superman was, in some ways, the first character created by pop culture nerds.
Two young Jewish boys from Cleveland, Ohio, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And they were boys who were beaten up by bullies and teased mercilessly, but they also got their revenge in Superman.
I think it was the year 1934. It was a hot summer night, and Jerry Siegel, the teenage writer, couldn't sleep at night. He was tossing and turning.
He had this dream in which he kept having flashes of a character that would become a combination of Samson and Hercules and a dozen other characters, from the Bible to the comic strips to the serials in the movie theater.
He wrote it all down. The very next morning, he runs over to his friend Joe Shuster's house, his artist friend, and he tells him the story of this superheroic character. And Joe Shuster starts making the original drawings.
Joe Shuster was a bodybuilder and fascinated with bodybuilding magazines, fascinated with images of acrobats, the tights, the cape. You can see all that in Superman's costume. Jerry Siegel's father died in a robbery when Jerry was a teenager, and the perpetrators were never caught. So he had this very immediate, visceral reason to hate crime. And I think Superman for him was a character who could, in a fantasy way, prevent things like that from happening.
Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster came of age in the Great Depression, when newspaper syndication was at its peak. In 1935, 130 syndicates offered almost 2,000 different comic strips to millions of readers. For talents like Siegel and Shuster, this seemed like a golden opportunity. But their Superman strip was rejected again and again.
Guys who did the syndicated comics became identified with their characters, and in a way they became as big stars as their characters.
Here, one of the comparative newcomers who began his strip during the gangster era.
Chester Gould with Dick Tracy, and Al Cap with Little Abner.
Would understand these dream people of Al Cap's imagination.
These people were celebrities, very rich celebrities.
This is Hal Foster.
One was Hal Foster, who did Tarzan, and who eventually did Prince Valiant.
Educational romances of the days of old called...
There was the man who did Flash Gordon, Alex Raymond, wonderful artist, and Milton Caniff, who did Terry and the Pirates. Everyone who started in my business held these artists as idols. These were the guys that really knew what they were doing, that communicated the way that we wanted to try to do.
Sunday is Sunday to my family, but Sunday is not simply Sunday for me. For Sunday's the one day when I love to see the funny.
My father conceived the idea of taking the Sunday pages, folding them over and folding them once again, and ending up with something roughly the size of today's comic book. And one day, as the family legend goes, he conceived the idea of putting a 10-cent sticker on some of these and putting them on a newsstand. I was delighted to find that they sold out rather quickly.
And that went on for a couple of years until they began to run out of suitable material to reprint from of previously syndicated strips. So they began to buy original material. And that was the beginnings of the industry.
The publishers were really a pretty sleazy bunch, and some of them were unquestionably connected to the big mobs. And a lot of them wanted to do something legitimate, but they wanted to go someplace where nobody was going to be checking the books too closely.
What they were putting out was porno books in a way, in those days. And then this legitimate thing came along and they jumped into it, you know.
One of the new publishers, Detective Comics, needed material for an action title. and decided to take a chance on the hero that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster had been shopping around for 5 years. The creators earned a total of $130 for 13 pages of Superman.
And then they had to take the newspaper strips and paste them together in the form of comic book pages. And it became the lead in Action Comics #1 for what would become DC Comics.
The elements that Siegel and Shuster adopted into this comic strip set the pace for virtually everything to come afterward. Superman.
The 1930s was a time when the common man needed a champion because the forces aligned against them were so powerful. So Superman may have begun as a fantasy imagination of a couple of teenagers, but he became a social crusader very quickly. His very first issue, he frees a wrongly convicted woman from death row.
I have proof of her innocence, a signed confession.
He drops in on a wife beater, throws him into the wall.
You're not fighting a woman now.
He stops a conspiracy between a senator, a weapons manufacturer. Pretty busy first day in the superhero job.
Superman! To best be in a position to use his amazing powers in a never-ending battle for true justice, Superman has assumed the skies of Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper.
He's not simply just this mighty Herculean kind of hero. You know, he takes on this persona of all-American guy.
Kent speaking. Hello, Daily Planet?
Superman is an alien. He's an immigrant. He comes from Krypton. He immigrated to Earth. He left everything behind. That world is gone. He comes here. He changes his name to something that sounds, you know, really Gentile, Clark Kent.
This looks like a job for Superman.
He transforms himself into the ultimate symbol of the American way of life. That was the powerful expression of the American immigrant experience, not just the Jewish experience.
When you strip everything else away, what you're looking at is a stranger in a strange land who wants to be part of a world and not an isolated alien. That's the backbone of America.